The sky bled crimson and gold as thunder cracked across the desolate plains of Nevada Territory. 1871. The three Kendrick sisters huddled beneath the solitary oak tree watching their father's wagon disappear into the gathering storm. He had promised to return with supplies, but deep in their hearts, they knew he was never coming back. Cora Kendrick, the eldest at 23, wrapped a protective arm around her sisters as rain began to pelt down mercilessly upon their already soaked forms. Her blonde hair, usually neatly pinned, now hung in wet ropes around her shoulders as she attempted to shield 14-year-old Charlotte and 18-year-old Catherine from the worst of the downpour. They had been waiting for nearly 6 hours now, their meager belongings stacked beside them, the rain turning their small wooden trunk and cloth bags into sodden, useless lumps. "He's not coming back, is he?" Charlotte whispered, her young voice barely audible above the howling wind. Her small frame trembled, not just from the cold, but from the devastating realization that their father had abandoned them on the outskirts of Hamilton. Nevada, a place they knew nothing about, except that it was supposed to be their fresh start after their mother's death. Catherine, the middle sister, stared stoically into the distance, her green eyes reflecting the same resignation Cora felt in her bones. "We always knew this might happen," she murmured. "Ever since Ma died, he's been looking for an excuse." Cora squeezed her sisters tighter. "We'll be all right," she assured them, though uncertainty gnawed at her insides. They had little money, no connections, and the storm was intensifying with each passing minute. The tree offered scant protection as lightning split the sky, followed by a deafening boom of thunder that made Charlotte bury her face against Cora's shoulder. "We need to find shelter," Cora decided, rising to her feet and pulling her sisters up alongside her. "We can't stay here." Catherine nodded, already gathering their least-soaked bags. "But where? We don't know anyone in Hamilton." Before Cora could answer, the sound of approaching hoofbeats cut through the storm's fury. The sisters instinctively huddled closer together, wary of strangers in these unfamiliar lands. Through the sheets of rain, a tall figure on horseback materialized, followed by a second horse pulling a small covered wagon. The rider slowed as he approached, and Cora could make out the broad shoulders and weather-worn hat of a man who clearly belonged to this harsh landscape. He reined his horse to a stop several feet from them, and for a moment simply observed their bedraggled state. "You ladies lost." His voice was deep but gentle, carrying easily over the storm's roar. Cora stepped forward slightly, positioning herself between the stranger and her sisters. "Our father left us here. He was supposed to return hours ago." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his considerable height. His face, partially shadowed by his hat, showed concern rather than threat. "Left you? In this?" He gestured to the worsening storm. Lightning flashed again, illuminating strong features and eyes that appeared more troubled than dangerous. "I'm Flynn Forrester," he said, approaching slowly as if careful not to frighten them. "I own the Whispering Pine Ranch about 4 miles east of here. No one should be out in this storm." Charlotte peered around Cora's protective stance. "Are you a real cowboy, Mr. Forrester?" A small smile softened his face. "Born and raised, miss. Look, I don't mean to frighten you, but this storm's turning into something fierce. I've got room at my ranch, warm food, dry clothes." "You can't stay out here." Cora hesitated, years of caution warring with their desperate situation. Flynn Forrester seemed genuine, but trusting a stranger wasn't something that came easily to her, especially after their father's betrayal. Flynn seemed to read her thoughts. "I understand your concern, miss. Kendrick, Cora Kendrick. These are my sisters, Catherine and Charlotte." Flynn nodded respectfully. "Miss Kendrick, I give you my word as a gentleman that no harm will come to you or your sisters at my ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Abigail Patterson, lives there too. She's practically raised me since I was knee-high, and she'd tan my hide if I didn't offer help to ladies in distress. Another crack of lightning, closer this time, made the decision for Cora. We accept your kindness, Mr. Forrester. Relief washed over his features. Good. Let's get your belongings loaded up. Working quickly, Flynn helped them gather their sodden possessions and load them into his wagon. He insisted Cora and Charlotte ride inside the covered portion while Catherine joined him on the driver's bench. As they set off, the rain intensified, turning the dirt road into a treacherous mudslide. Flynn handled the reins with expert skill, navigating the dangerous conditions with a calm that gradually eased Cora's anxiety. Through the canvas opening, she watched his profile as he occasionally pointed out landmarks to Catherine, whose rigid posture had begun to relax slightly. The journey felt eternal, though it couldn't have been more than an hour before the outline of buildings emerged through the torrential rain. Whispering Pine Ranch was larger than Cora had anticipated, a sprawling main house constructed of solid timber, several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn. Even through the storm, she could see it was well maintained, a testament to its owner's character. Flynn guided the wagon to the covered porch of the main house and helped each sister down. Charlotte was practically asleep on her feet, exhaustion having finally claimed her youthful energy. Without asking, Flynn lifted the young girl into his arms and nodded for Cora and Catherine to follow him inside. The warmth that greeted them was overwhelming after hours in the cold rain. A fire roared in a stone hearth, casting dancing light across a comfortable, modest living area. Rugs covered portions of the wooden floor, and sturdy, well-crafted furniture spoke of practicality rather than ostentation. Flynn Forrester, is that you tracking mud all over my clean floors? A robust woman with silver-streaked dark hair emerged from what appeared to be a kitchen, her reprimand dying on her lips as she took in the bedraggled sisters. "Oh, my goodness! What have you brought home, Mrs. Patterson? These ladies need our help," Flynn explained, still cradling the half-asleep Charlotte. "This is Cora and Catherine Kendrick, and this little one is Charlotte. They were abandoned outside town in the storm." Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted instantly from surprise to maternal concern. "Abandoned? Lord have mercy." She bustled forward, already untying her apron. "You poor dears must be frozen through. Flynn, take the little one to the guest room upstairs. I'll fetch dry clothes and start heating water for baths." Flynn nodded and carried Charlotte toward the stairs. Cora moved to follow, but Mrs. Patterson gently caught her arm. "Don't you worry, dear. Flynn's got a good heart. Never hurt a soul who didn't deserve it, and certainly not a child." Something in the older woman's certainty eased Cora's lingering concerns. She watched as Flynn climbed the stairs with careful steps, handling her sister with a tenderness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "Now then," Mrs. Patterson continued, "let's get you two sorted as well. You're shaking like aspen leaves in autumn." The next hour passed in a blur of warm baths, dry clothes borrowed from Mrs. Patterson's own wardrobe, though they hung loose on the sisters' slender frames, and bowls of rich beef stew that brought life back to their cold, numbed bodies. Flynn returned downstairs after ensuring Charlotte was comfortable and sat quietly at the table while Cora explained their situation. "Our mother died last winter," she said, her fingers tightening around her spoon. "Consumption. Father, he didn't handle it well. Started drinking, gambling. We lost our farm in Missouri. He convinced us that Nevada held opportunities, that we could start fresh." Catherine's bitter laugh held no humor. What he meant was that he could abandon us somewhere far from anyone who knew us, where no one would hold him accountable. Flynn's expression darkened. Some men don't deserve the families they're given. He looked directly at Cora, his blue eyes intense. You and your sisters can stay here at Whispering Pine for as long as you need. Forever, if it comes to that. Cora nearly dropped her spoon. Mr. Forrester, that's exceedingly generous, but we couldn't possibly. It's not charity, Miss Kendrick, Flynn interrupted gently. This ranch is too big for just me and Mrs. Patterson. There's work if you want it and shelter regardless. I won't see 3 young women cast out with nowhere to go. Mrs. Patterson nodded approvingly. He's right, dear. Besides, I could use the help. These old bones aren't what they used to be, and this place could benefit from a woman's touch. No offense to you, Flynn. Flynn smiled. None taken. You know I'm hopeless with anything finer than horsehair. Cora exchanged glances with Catherine, who gave a small nod. We accept your kindness for tonight, Mr. Forrester. As for the future, perhaps we could discuss terms tomorrow when we've all had some rest. Fair enough, Flynn agreed, rising from the table. Mrs. Patterson will show you to your rooms. Sleep as long as you need. As he turned to leave, Cora called after him. Mr. Forrester. When he looked back, she continued, Thank you. Not many would have stopped. A shadow passed over his features. Not many should have had to, Miss Kendrick. Later, lying in a comfortable bed beside her sleeping sisters, Cora stared at the ceiling, listening to the storm rage outside. Their father was truly gone now, having finally abandoned the responsibilities that had weighed on him since their mother's death. She should have felt more devastated, but all she felt was a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. Flynn Forrester was a mystery, a cowboy with calloused hands and gentle manners, offering sanctuary without conditions. It seemed too good to be true, yet Mrs. Patterson's obvious affection for him suggested there was more to the man than simply a charitable nature. Tomorrow would bring decisions. For tonight, at least, they were safe, warm, and for the first time in months, Cora allowed herself to hope that perhaps things might turn out all right after all. Morning arrived with brilliant sunshine that belied the previous night's violence. Cora woke to find Charlotte already missing from the bed they'd shared, though Catherine still slumbered beside her. Following the sounds of conversation and the enticing aroma of coffee, Cora made her way downstairs. In the kitchen, she found Charlotte perched on a stool, animatedly describing something to Mrs. Patterson, who was frying bacon at the large cast-iron stove. Flynn sat at the table, a newspaper spread before him, though his attention was clearly on Charlotte's story. And then the lightning hit the tree right next to us. It was terrifying but also beautiful, wasn't it, Cora? Charlotte noticed her sister's entrance and beamed. Good morning, Cora said, suddenly conscious of her borrowed nightgown and hastily pinned hair. Flynn stood immediately. Good morning, Miss Kendrick. I hope you slept well. Better than I have in months, thank you. She accepted the cup of coffee Mrs. Patterson handed her. I see Charlotte has already made herself at home. Mrs. Patterson chuckled. This one's been helping me with breakfast and telling the most fascinating stories. A natural storyteller, your sister. Charlotte preened under the praise. Mrs. Patterson said I could help gather eggs later if it's all right with you, Cora. Of course, but don't be a bother. She's no bother at all, Flynn assured her, resuming his seat. It's nice having young energy around the place. Cora studied him over her coffee cup. In daylight, Flynn Forrester was even more imposing than he'd seemed last night, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His hair, a rich chestnut brown, was neatly trimmed, and his face, while weathered, couldn't have been much past 30. Yet there was something in his eyes that suggested he'd seen more than his years might account for. Mr. Forrester was just telling me about his horses, Charlotte continued excitedly. He has 27, and he trains them himself. He said he might teach me to ride a gentle one if you approve. Cora raised an eyebrow. That's very kind, but we shouldn't impose further on Mr. Forrester's generosity. It's no imposition, Flynn insisted. And please call me Flynn. Mr. Forrester makes me feel like my father. Before Cora could respond, Catherine appeared in the doorway, looking slightly disoriented but rested. Perfect timing, Mrs. Patterson announced. Breakfast is ready. Sit, all of you, before it gets cold. As they ate, Flynn explained more about Whispering Pine Ranch. He'd inherited it from his uncle 5 years prior, though he'd worked the land since he was 16. The ranch primarily raised horses, with some cattle on the side, and had earned a solid reputation throughout Nevada territory for the quality of their stock. There's a town settlement about 4 miles west Hamilton proper, Flynn explained. Small but growing. Got a general store, post office, church, school, and unfortunately 3 saloons. And a dressmaker, Mrs. Patterson added, though her prices are highway robbery. I still do most of my own sewing. Catherine perked up at this. I'm quite skilled with a needle. Our mother taught us all. Flynn looked thoughtful. Might be an opportunity there. Hamilton's growing fast with the silver mines expanding. Lot of men bringing wives and families now, not just prospectors and drifters. The conversation continued pleasantly through breakfast, with Flynn outlining potential opportunities for the sisters should they choose to stay in the area. When the meal concluded, he excused himself to attend to ranch duties, leaving the sisters with Mrs. Patterson. Now then, the housekeeper said once Flynn had departed, let's see about finding you girls some proper clothes. Can't have you running around in nightgowns all day. Mrs. Patterson led them to a storeroom where several trunks contained clothing that had belonged to Flynn's late aunt. With some adjustments, the dresses would fit Cora and Catherine, while Charlotte could make do with shortened hems until proper garments could be acquired. As Catherine and Mrs. Patterson discussed alterations, Cora wandered to the window. Outside, she could see Flynn in one of the corrals, working with a young horse. His movements were confident and patient, never startling the animal but gradually building trust. It was fascinating to watch. He's good with wild things, Mrs. Patterson said, appearing beside her. Always has been. Animals, children, people who have been hurt, they sense something in him. Cora turned to the older woman. How did you come to work for him? Mrs. Patterson smiled fondly. I was his mother's midwife, if you can believe it. Stayed on as nanny when Flynn was born. His parents died in a flash flood when he was 14, terrible tragedy. His uncle took him in, taught him ranching. When Jonas, that's the uncle, passed on, he left everything to Flynn. By then I was already part of the furniture, she chuckled. Couldn't get rid of me if he tried. He seems very kind. Kind, yes, and stubborn as a mule, works too hard and keeps too much to himself. Mrs. Patterson gave Cora a knowing look. This ranch needs a family to fill it, not just a man and his old housekeeper. Cora felt heat rise to her cheeks. Mrs. Patterson, if you're suggesting, the older woman laughed. I'm not suggesting anything, dear. Just observing that Flynn Forrester has been alone too long, and Providence has an interesting way of working things out. Throughout the day, Cora found herself contemplating their situation. The practical side of her recognized the extraordinary opportunity Flynn's offer presented: safety, shelter, possible employment. The cautious side, honed by years of dealing with their father's unpredictability, warned against accepting charity that might come with hidden expectations. By late afternoon, she had decided they would stay temporarily, at least until they could earn enough to establish themselves independently in Hamilton. She found Flynn in the barn, examining a horse's injured leg. "Mr. Forrester Flynn," she corrected herself when he glanced up. "Might I have a word?" He straightened, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Of course, Miss Kendrick. Cora, please. If I'm to call you Flynn, it's only fair." A smile touched his lips. "Cora, then. What can I do for you?" She clasped her hands to stop their nervous fidgeting. "My sisters and I have discussed your generous offer. We would like to accept your hospitality temporarily while we work to establish ourselves. I insist on contributing. Catherine is skilled with sewing and cooking. I've managed households and accounts, and Charlotte, though young, is a quick learner." Flynn regarded her steadily. "You don't need to earn your keep, Cora. This isn't a transaction." "Perhaps not for you, but it is for me," she replied firmly. "I won't have my sisters or myself living on charity. We've been dependent too long on the unreliable kindness of others." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "I understand pride, believe me. If it makes you more comfortable, we can certainly find ways for you all to contribute. The ranch has prospered, but there's always more to be done than hands to do it." Relief washed over her. "Thank you. That's all I ask." "In that case," Flynn said, a hint of challenge in his voice, "can you ride?" The question caught her off guard. "Yes, though it's been some time." "Good. Tomorrow I need to check the north pasture fence line. You can join me, get familiar with the property. That is, if you're not afraid of a little hard work." Cora raised her chin. "I've never shied away from hard work, Mr. Forrester." His smile broadened. "Neither have I, Miss Kendrick. We'll leave after breakfast." True to his word, Flynn was ready the next morning with 2 saddled horses. Cora had spent the evening altering one of the late Mrs. Forrester's riding skirts to fit her slimmer frame, and now felt relatively prepared for the day ahead, though her stomach fluttered nervously at the prospect of hours alone with Flynn. "This is Willow," Flynn introduced the gentle mare he'd selected for her. "Steady as they come, but with spirit when you need it." Cora approached the horse, letting her sniff her hand before stroking her neck. "She's beautiful." Flynn watched her with approval. "You handle horses well." "Your father teach you?" "No," Cora said, her voice cooling. "He was rarely interested in teaching us anything useful. Our neighbor, Mr. Collins, taught me when I was 12. Said a girl ought to know how to get herself places without depending on a man to take her." Flynn's laugh was unexpected and warm. "Sound advice. Shall we?" They set off at an easy pace, Flynn pointing out landmarks and explaining the boundaries of Whispering Pine as they rode. The ranch was even more impressive by daylight, rolling grasslands interspersed with stands of the namesake pines, clear streams cutting through valleys, and in the distance, the purple silhouettes of mountains. "It's breathtaking," Cora admitted as they paused atop a ridge. Below them, a herd of horses grazed peacefully in a meadow dotted with wildflowers. "How many acres?" "Just over 15,000, Flynn answered, pride evident in his voice. "My uncle started with 100 acres and a dream, built it piece by piece over 40 years. And no misses." "Forrester to share it with?" The question slipped out before Cora could stop herself. "I'm sorry, that was forward of me." Flynn didn't seem offended. "No need to apologize. There was someone once, Emily Mason. We were engaged 5 years ago." His tone suggested there was more to the story. After a moment of silence, he continued. "There was a diphtheria outbreak in Hamilton. Emily was helping nurse the sick children at the school. She caught it herself." His voice remained steady, but Cora could hear the old pain beneath the words. "She was gone within a week." "I'm sorry," Cora said softly, the simple words inadequate for such a loss. Flynn nodded acknowledgement. "What about you? No suitors lamenting your departure from Missouri?" Cora gave a humorless laugh. "Hardly. Father's reputation made us poor prospects. despite Mother's best efforts to maintain our standing. After she died, she shook her head. We were too busy surviving to worry about courtships. They rode in companionable silence for a while before Flynn guided them toward a section of fence that showed signs of damage. Likely deer, he explained, dismounting. Or could be someone's stray cattle. Either way needs fixing. Cora slid from her saddle, grateful for the distraction of physical work. For the next few hours, they repaired the fence line, Cora holding posts steady while Flynn secured them, passing tools when needed and learning the basics of ranch maintenance. Flynn was a patient teacher, explaining rather than dictating, and seeming genuinely pleased when she grasped concepts quickly. By midday, they had completed the repairs and stopped by a stream to rest and eat the lunch Mrs. Patterson had packed. Sitting on a fallen log, sharing bread, cheese, and apples, Cora found herself more relaxed in Flynn's company than she had been with anyone in years. "You know," Flynn said, tossing an apple core into the bushes, "you're not what I expected." Cora raised an eyebrow. "And what did you expect, Mr. Forrester? Helplessness, I suppose. Instead, I find myself working alongside a woman who can drive fence posts, identify breeding stock at a glance, and still maintain perfect posture in a side saddle." Disappointed, she challenged, though his tone suggested the opposite. Flynn's gaze met hers directly. Impressed. "And please, we agreed on Flynn." "Flynn," she repeated, finding she liked the sound of his name on her lips. "Well, Flynn, I should warn you that you haven't begun to see what the Kendrick sisters are capable of." His smile reached his eyes. "I look forward to finding out." The ride back to the ranch house was filled with easy conversation. Flynn shared stories of his early days learning to ranch, and Cora found herself reciprocating with tales of her sister's antics growing up. By the time they returned, something had shifted between them, a foundation of mutual respect that felt like the beginning of friendship. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to life at Whispering Pine Ranch. True to her word, Cora proved her value quickly, taking over the household accounts that Flynn had neglected and discovering several areas where costs could be reduced. Catherine's sewing skills became invaluable when Mrs. Patterson introduced her to several prominent Hamilton families seeking fine dressmaking. Even Charlotte found her place, initially helping with simple chores but gradually becoming Flynn's shadow around the ranch, absorbing knowledge about horses and cattle with an enthusiasm that delighted him. One evening in late June, nearly a month after their arrival, Cora sat on the front porch, enjoying the cooler air after a scorching day. Flynn joined her, offering a glass of lemonade as he settled into the adjacent rocking chair. "Charlotte's a natural with horses," he commented. "Taught her to lunge the yearlings today. Picked it up faster than most ranch hands I've hired." Cora smiled fondly. She's always been quick to learn things that interest her, less so with subjects like algebra and geography. Flynn chuckled. "Can't say I blame her there." He took a sip of his lemonade, then asked casually, "Have you given any more thought to your plans? For staying in Hamilton, I mean." The question caught Cora off guard. While they had initially agreed their arrangement was temporary, the subject hadn't been raised again as days turned into weeks. "To be honest, I haven't," she admitted. "We've been so busy settling in." She hesitated, then added, "Are you anxious for us to move on?" "God, no," Flynn replied quickly. "Just the opposite. He cleared his throat. "The ranch feels more alive with you all here. Mrs. Patterson is happier than I've seen her in years, and I." He trailed off, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "And you?" Cora prompted gently. Flynn met her gaze. "I've grown accustomed to your company, Cora Kendrick. The thought of this place without you and your sisters feels wrong somehow." The simple admission sent warmth spreading through her chest. Over the past month, she'd found herself increasingly drawn to Flynn, his quiet strength, his kindness, the way he listened when she spoke as if her words mattered. But she'd been careful to keep these feelings contained, unwilling to mistake gratitude for something deeper or to risk their stable situation with inappropriate attachments. "We've imposed on your hospitality far longer than we should have," she said carefully. "It's not an imposition." Flynn set his glass down and leaned forward. "Cora, when I said you could stay forever, I meant it. This place is big enough for all of us, and God knows it could use the life you three have brought to it." "Flynn," she began, unsure how to express the complicated emotions his words stirred. They were interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Flynn stood, his expression shifting to concern as he moved to the porch edge. A rider was approaching at speed, and even in the fading light, Cora could tell something was wrong. "That's Jim Harker," Flynn said, already moving down the steps. "One of my hands who works in town most days." The rider pulled up sharply, his horse lathered from hard riding. "Flynn, thank God you're here. There's trouble in town, big trouble." "What happened?" Flynn demanded. "Group of men rode in this afternoon, claim they're looking for 3 women sisters." Jim glanced at Cora, who had followed Flynn into the yard. "Been asking all over town, getting mean about it. Said one of 'em stole something valuable." Cora's blood ran cold. "My father," she whispered. Flynn's face hardened. "How many men?" "4, including a fella who says he's their pa. Other 3 look like the kind who'd cut your throat for $1. Jim wiped sweat from his brow. "They've been drinking at Walker's saloon for hours, getting louder. Sheriff tried to settle them down, but they're claiming legal right to retrieve their kin." Flynn turned to Cora. "Would your father come after you? Really?" Cora's mind raced. We didn't take anything of value. We barely had time to grab our clothes." Then realization dawned. "Unless." "Mother's locket. It's gold with a small diamond. Catherine wears it always, hidden. Father gambled away everything else of value before we left Missouri." Flynn's jaw tightened. "Jim, ride back to town. Tell Sheriff Briggs I'm coming in, but first make sure Mrs. Patterson and the other girls know to bar the doors. No one enters but me or my men." Jim nodded and wheeled his horse around, heading for the back of the house where Mrs. Patterson would likely be in the kitchen. "I'm coming with you," Cora stated firmly. "Absolutely not," Flynn countered. "These men sound dangerous, and if your father is drunk—" "He's always drunk," Cora interrupted. "And I know how to handle him. Besides, he has no legal claim on Catherine or me. We're of age, and I will not allow him near Charlotte." Flynn studied her for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. "Fine, but you stay behind me, and if things get ugly, you do exactly as I say." "Agreed." Within minutes, they were riding hard toward Hamilton, the setting sun casting long shadows across the land. Cora's mind churned with worry and anger. After abandoning them to the storm, how dare her father show up now, making false accusations? The locket had been her mother's, explicitly left to Catherine in her will, not that their father had ever respected such legal niceties. Hamilton came into view as darkness fell, the saloon's yellow lights spilling onto the main street. Flynn led them directly to the sheriff's office, where a stout man with a graying mustache waited on the porch. "Figured you'd be along," Sheriff Briggs greeted Flynn. "Jim find you?" "He did." "What's the situation, Henry?" 4 men still at Walker's. "Leader claims to be Thaddeus Kendrick, says his daughters ran off with family property." The sheriff glanced at Cora. "This one of them?" Flynn nodded. "Cora Kendrick, Sheriff Henry Briggs. Cora and her sisters have been staying at my ranch since their father abandoned them in that big storm last month." "Abandoned? That changes things." Briggs frowned. "Still, Family matters can get complicated legally. My sisters and I are not property, Cora said firmly. Catherine and I are adults, and Charlotte is under our guardianship since our father abdicated his responsibilities. As for the locket he's likely claiming, it was our mother's, left specifically to Catherine in her will. Briggs nodded thoughtfully. You speak well, Miss Kendrick. Still, might be best to avoid a confrontation if possible. These men with your father don't look like the reasonable sort. I want to see him, Cora insisted. Face him directly. Flynn and Briggs exchanged glances. Might diffuse things, Briggs admitted. Having her there could prevent wild claims, but I'll bring a deputy, just in case. The three walked to Walker's saloon, the raucous sounds of drunken laughter growing louder as they approached. Flynn positioned himself slightly ahead of Cora as they entered, his presence causing a momentary hush before conversations resumed at a lower volume. In the corner sat 4 men around a table littered with bottles. Cora immediately recognized her father thinner than she remembered, his once handsome face now bloated and red from drink. The men with him were strangers, rough-looking individuals whose eyes tracked every movement in the room with predatory awareness. Thaddeus Kendrick, Sheriff Briggs announced as they approached the table. I understand you're looking for your daughters. Thaddeus looked up blearily, his eyes narrowing as they focused on Cora. There's one of the ungrateful wretches now, he slurred. Where's your sisters, girl? And my property. Cora stepped forward, ignoring Flynn's attempt to keep her behind him. Hello, father. I see abandoning your children in a storm wasn't enough cruelty for one summer. One of Thaddeus's companions snickered, but fell silent under the glare from both Flynn and the sheriff. Don't you take that tone with me, Thaddeus growled, attempting to stand but swaying dangerously. I came back for you girls, not my fault you wandered off. We waited 6 hours in pouring rain, Cora replied coldly. You were never coming back. Had business, Thaddeus muttered. Anyways, I'm here now. You and your sisters are coming with me, and I want your mother's locket worth a pretty penny, that is. The locket belongs to Catherine. Mother left it to her in her will. What's mine is mine, Thaddeus insisted, pounding his fist on the table. Including my daughters. Who's this man you're hiding behind, anyway? Got yourself a protector, have you? Always knew you'd turn out just like your mother. Spreading your Flynn moved so quickly Cora barely registered it before he had Thaddeus by the collar, lifting him partially off his feet. You will not speak to her that way, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. The 3 men with Thaddeus jumped to their feet, but froze when Sheriff Briggs and his deputy placed hands on their sidearms. Easy now, Briggs cautioned. Let's all just calm down. Flynn released Thaddeus, who staggered back into his chair. Miss Kendrick and her sisters are under my protection, Flynn stated clearly, addressing not just Thaddeus but the entire saloon. They have established residence at Whispering Pine Ranch of their own free will, and they will remain there as long as they choose. The law says, one of Thaddeus's companions began. The law says abandonment is a serious matter, Briggs interrupted, as is making false accusations of theft. Now, I suggest you gentlemen finish your drinks and move on. Hamilton doesn't need your kind of trouble. Thaddeus glared at Cora with bloodshot eyes. This ain't over, girl. Those are my daughters, and I'll get them back and what's owed me. You owe us, father, Cora replied steadily. Years of security that you gambled away. Mother's last days, which you spent in saloons rather than at her bedside. A childhood for Charlotte that wasn't shadowed by your failures. She took a deep breath. But we don't want payment. We just want to be left in peace. A tense silence followed her words. Finally, Sheriff Briggs stepped forward. Mr. Kendrick, I'm giving you and your friends until sunup to leave Hamilton. After that, I'll consider you trespassers and act accordingly. Thaddeus seemed ready to argue, but one of his companions placed a warning hand on his arm. They exchanged glances, and Cora could see calculation replacing anger in her father's eyes. "Fine," Thaddeus muttered eventually, "but this ain't finished." As they left the saloon, Cora felt Flynn's hand at the small of her back, steady and reassuring. "You were magnificent," he murmured once they were outside. "I was terrified," she admitted. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Flynn said. "It's facing it anyway." "And you, Cora Kendrick, are the bravest person I know." The ride back to Whispering Pine was quieter, both lost in their thoughts. Cora couldn't help worrying that her father might attempt something desperate, but Flynn assured her that his ranch hands would keep watch through the night, and Sheriff Briggs had promised to ensure Thaddeus and his companions left town. Catherine and Charlotte were waiting anxiously when they returned, Mrs. Patterson having filled them in on the situation. Charlotte flung herself into Cora's arms while Catherine stood back, fingers worrying the chain of their mother's locket beneath her collar. "Is he really here?" Charlotte whispered. "He's not going to take us away, is he?" "No, sweetheart," Cora promised, hugging her tightly. "Sheriff Briggs is making sure Father leaves town, and Flynn—" She looked up to find him watching them with an expression that made her heart skip. "Flynn won't let anyone take us anywhere we don't want to go." Later that night, after the younger girls had finally fallen asleep, Cora found herself unable to rest. She wrapped a shawl around her nightgown and crept downstairs, intending to make some tea. To her surprise, she found Flynn still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a ledger open before him, though he didn't appear to be focusing on it. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up. "No, too many thoughts." She moved to the stove where the kettle still held warm water. "Tea." "Please." They sat in companionable silence as Cora prepared the tea. When she placed a cup before him and settled across the table with her own, Flynn finally closed the ledger and met her gaze. "I've been thinking," he began, "about what you said at the saloon, about wanting peace." Cora nodded, waiting. "Whispering Pine could be that peace, Cora, for you and your sisters, not temporarily but permanently." Her heart began to race. "Flynn, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not offering charity. You've more than earned your place here. Catherine's sewing business is thriving. You've improved the ranch's finances considerably, and Charlotte, well, that girl will be running her own ranch someday, I'd wager." Cora smiled at the accuracy of his assessment. "We've been fortunate to find such a haven." "It's more than that," Flynn continued, his voice taking on an earnest quality. "This ranch has always been just a place to work for me, never truly a home, not until you three arrived." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Especially you, Cora." The touch of his hand sent warmth spreading through her. "What are you saying, Flynn?" "I'm saying that I care for you, more than I thought possible after Emily. And while I know it's too soon, that you may not feel the same way, I want you to know that my offer for you all to stay forever stands, regardless. No conditions, no expectations." Cora stared at their joined hands, emotions warring within her. Fear of dependency battled with the undeniable feelings that had been growing since that first day. Flynn had shown himself to be honorable, kind, hardworking, everything her father was not. "I do care for you," she admitted softly, "but I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of trusting. Of building something only to see it destroyed. Of allowing myself to need someone again." Flynn's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "I understand fear, Cora. I felt it too after Emily. Thought I'd never let myself be vulnerable again." He smiled slightly. "Then I found three sisters abandoned in a storm, and everything changed." Cora found herself returning his smile. "You certainly turned our lives upside down, Flynn Forrester. For the better, I hope, undeniably." They sat like that for a long moment, the night quiet around them, possibility hanging in the air. Finally, Flynn spoke again. "I'm not asking for any declarations tonight. Just stay. Give us time to see what might grow between us. All I know is that Whispering Pine feels right with you here, and empty when you're gone." Cora considered his words. The ranch had become dear to her over the past month, not just the physical place, but the sense of purpose, the community of people who depended on one another. And Flynn had become essential in ways she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge. "We'll stay," she decided, her voice stronger now. "But I need you to understand something. I won't allow my sisters or myself to be in a position where we must depend entirely on someone else's goodwill ever again. Whatever develops between us, I need to maintain my independence." Instead of being offended, Flynn looked pleased. "I would expect nothing less. In fact, I was hoping you might consider formalizing your role here. The ranch books are in the best shape they've been in years thanks to you. I'd like to make you a proper business partner in Whispering Pine." Cora stared at him in surprise. "A partner? In the ranch?" Flynn nodded. "You have a head for business that I lack. Together we could expand operations, maybe even start breeding those Arabians you've been researching." The offer was so unexpected, so perfectly aligned with dreams she'd barely allowed herself to contemplate, that Cora found herself momentarily speechless. "Think about it," Flynn said, squeezing her hand gently before releasing it. "No rush to decide." As the summer progressed into autumn, life at Whispering Pine fell into new rhythms. True to Sheriff Briggs's word, Thaddeus Kendrick and his unsavory companions had left Hamilton without further incident, though Cora remained wary, half expecting her father to resurface when least expected. Catherine's dressmaking business flourished, with orders coming not just from Hamilton, but from as far away as Virginia City. She converted one of the unused ranch outbuildings into a proper workshop, even taking on an apprentice, Mary Chen, the bright 16-year-old daughter of Hamilton's laundry owner. Charlotte began attending the local school, where her natural intelligence and newfound confidence quickly made her a favorite among teachers. She still spent every available moment learning ranch work from Flynn, who treated her questions with the same seriousness he would give to any adult. As for Cora, she had accepted Flynn's offer of partnership after a week of careful consideration. They drew up formal papers with help from Hamilton's lawyer, establishing her financial stake in the ranch through her labor and expertise, rather than monetary investment. The arrangement gave her the security and independence she craved while deepening her connection to both the land and to Flynn. Their relationship evolved gradually, neither rushing nor holding back. Evening conversations on the porch became a cherished ritual. Rides to check fence lines or inspect herds turned into opportunities to share confidences. Meals became filled with laughter and debate, Flynn clearly delighting in Cora's sharp mind and willing to consider her perspectives, even when they differed from his own. By October, when the aspen trees had turned golden and the first hints of winter chill touched the morning air, Cora realized she had fallen irrevocably in love with Flynn Forrester. The realization came not during some dramatic moment, but in the ordinary magic of a Tuesday afternoon. She had been reviewing supplier contracts in the ranch office when Flynn entered, covered in dust from working with the horses. Without a word, he'd placed a small bunch of late wildflowers on her desk, kissed her cheek, and left to clean up for dinner. The simple gesture, thoughtful, respectful of her work, yet unmistakably tender, crystallized what her heart had known for weeks. That evening, after Charlotte had been sent to bed and Catherine had retired to finish a rush order, Cora and Flynn took their customary places on the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the black velvet sky, a crescent moon providing just enough light to illuminate Flynn's profile as he rocked gently beside her. "I received a letter from that horse breeder in Kentucky today," Cora said, breaking the comfortable silence. "He's agreed to our terms for the stallion." Flynn turned to her, pride evident in his expression. "That's your doing. I'd have paid his asking price." "Which would have been highway robbery," she returned with a smile. "The bloodlines are impressive, but not worth an extra $200. Still, it's a coup for Whispering Pine. We'll have the finest breeding program in the territory within 5 years if your plans hold true." "Our plans," Cora corrected gently. Flynn's rocking slowed. "I like the sound of that. Our plans, our future." Cora's heart quickened. "Flynn." He rose from his chair and knelt before hers, taking her hands in his. "Cora Kendrick, I've been trying to find the perfect moment, the perfect words for weeks now. But I'm realizing there's no perfect time, just this time our time." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the feeling of his calloused hands enveloping hers. "I love you," Flynn said simply. "I love your strength, your intelligence, your fierce protection of your sisters. I love the way you challenge me, the way you've breathed life back into this ranch, the way you've healed parts of me I thought would always remain broken." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring with a modest diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires. "This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you would wear it as my wife." Tears blurred Cora's vision as emotions overwhelmed her. "Oh, Flynn," she whispered, "I love you too, so much that it terrifies me sometimes." "Is that a yes?" Hope and uncertainty mingled in his voice. "Yes," Cora affirmed, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you, Flynn Forrester." He slid the ring onto her finger, then drew her into a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future, tender yet passionate, secure yet thrilling. When they finally parted, both breathless, Flynn pressed his forehead to hers. "I should warn you," he murmured. "Mrs. Patterson has been planning our wedding since about 2 days after you arrived. She'll be insufferable now that it's official." Cora laughed. "Catherine will be just as bad. She's already sketched wedding dress designs just in case." Flynn pulled back slightly, his expression growing serious. "There's something else. I've been thinking about Charlotte." "What about her?" "I'd like to formally adopt her if you and Catherine agree. Make her legally my daughter, not just my sister-in-law." Fresh tears welled in Cora's eyes. "You would do that?" In a heartbeat. "That girl's worked her way into my heart just as surely as you have." "Different way, of course," he added with a smile, "but just as deep. She deserves to have a father who's proud of her, who will support her dreams, whatever they may be." "She'll be over the moon," Cora said, imagining her youngest sister's reaction. "She already looks up to you more than anyone." Flynn kissed her again, then helped her to her feet. "Should we tell them tonight, or wait until morning?" The sound of a door opening behind them answered the question. Catherine stood in the doorway, her expression curious. "Tell who what?" Cora exchanged glances with Flynn, then extended her hand, the ring catching moonlight as she moved. "Flynn has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes." Catherine's squeal of delight brought Mrs. Patterson running from the kitchen, and moments later, a sleepy-eyed Charlotte appeared at the top of the stairs. The next hour dissolved into joyful chaos, congratulations, tears, impromptu wedding planning, and the sharing of Flynn's plan to adopt Charlotte, which indeed rendered the young girl speechless with happiness before she launched herself into his arms. Later, much later, when the household had finally settled, Cora stood at her bedroom window, gazing out at the sleeping ranch. Snow would come soon, the first winter at Whispering Pine. But unlike so many winters past, filled with uncertainty and want, this one would bring warmth, security, and love. Her thoughts drifted to that stormy night months ago when three abandoned sisters huddled beneath an oak tree, certain that all hope was lost. How could they have imagined that their lowest moment would lead them here to family, to purpose, to home? A soft knock at her door roused Cora from her reverie. Opening it, she found Flynn standing in the hallway, his expression both apologetic and determined. "I know it's late," he began, "but there's something I need to show you." Curious, Cora wrapped her shawl tighter and followed him downstairs and out onto the porch. The night had grown colder, their breath visible in the moonlight. "Flynn, what? Just wait," he interrupted gently, pointing toward the eastern horizon. "Watch." For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, just as Cora was about to question him again, the first hint of green appeared in the night sky, a shimmer that quickly expanded into ribbons of emerald and violet light, dancing across the heavens. "The northern lights," Cora breathed, awestruck. "I've never seen them so far south." "Rare, but not unheard of," Flynn explained, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "My uncle used to say they were messages from those we've lost, reminding us they're still watching over us." Cora leaned into his embrace, understanding the significance. "Emily, and your parents?" Flynn nodded, his eyes reflecting the celestial display. "And your mother too, I imagine. I like to think they'd approve of us, of this family we're building." "I'm sure they would," Cora agreed, emotion tightening her throat. They stood together, witnessing nature's magnificent light show, until the colors gradually faded back into the ordinary brilliance of stars. "Come spring," Flynn said as they reluctantly turned to go inside, "I want to build an addition to the house. More bedrooms, a proper study for you, maybe a music room for Charlotte," she mentioned, wanting to learn piano. Cora smiled at his enthusiasm. "Planning for the future, Mr. Forrester. Our future Mrs. Forrester-to-be," he kissed her lightly. "A big, bright, beautiful future." In December, with snow blanketing Whispering Pine in pristine white, Cora Kendrick became Cora Forrester in a ceremony performed in Hamilton's small church. Catherine had indeed created a masterpiece of a wedding gown, and Charlotte, officially Flynn's daughter as of the previous week, proudly served as maid of honor. Mrs. Patterson wept openly throughout the service, while even Sheriff Briggs was seen discreetly wiping his eyes. The entire town turned out for the celebration afterwards, held in the newly expanded community hall. Music, dancing, and enough food to feed half the territory marked the occasion as the social event of the year. Flynn and Cora moved among their guests hand in hand, their happiness palpable to everyone who saw them. As midnight approached, Flynn led his bride outside to where a carriage waited to take them to Virginia City for a brief honeymoon. Catherine and Charlotte stood with Mrs. Patterson on the steps, waving goodbye amid a shower of rice and good wishes. "I have something for you," Flynn said once they were settled in the carriage. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small wooden box, beautifully carved with pine trees and horses. Cora opened it to find a folded piece of paper. Puzzled, she unfolded it to reveal a land deed, the official title to Whispering Pine Ranch, newly revised to list both Flynn Forrester and Cora Forrester as equal owners. "Flynn," she gasped, understanding the magnitude of the gift. "This is too much." "It's exactly right," he corrected, taking her gloved hands in his. "Equal partners in everything, just as we promised." As the carriage pulled away from Hamilton, Cora nestled against her husband's side, overwhelmed with gratitude for the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. From abandonment to belonging, from fear to love, from uncertainty to promise, the transformation seemed almost too miraculous to believe. Yet it was real as the strong arm around her shoulders, as tangible as the ring on her finger, as certain as the love in her heart. Whispering Pine Ranch had indeed become the forever home Flynn had offered on that stormy night, not just for her, but for all three Kendrick sisters. And as snow began to fall gently around their carriage, Cora knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning of their story. Spring 1872 brought renewal to Whispering Pine Ranch in more ways than one. The promised addition to the main house was well underway, with local craftsmen working alongside ranch hands to create the expanded living space that the growing family required. Flynn had insisted on the finest materials, stating that this house will stand for generations of Forresters to come. Those words had brought a blush to Cora's cheeks, for they both knew she was expecting their first child, due to arrive in early autumn. The news had been received with jubilation throughout the household, with Charlotte declaring herself the most excited aunt to be in Nevada territory, and Catherine already designing an elaborate bassinet and layettes. On a particularly fine April morning, Cora stood surveying the construction, one hand resting unconsciously on her still flat stomach. The past 4 months of marriage had been everything she had hoped for and more. Flynn was a devoted, passionate husband who treated her as a true equal, valuing her opinions and supporting her continued management of ranch affairs, even as local society expected her to retreat into purely domestic concerns. Contemplating our empire, Mrs. Forrester. Flynn's voice came from behind her, followed by his arms encircling her waist. Cora leaned back against him, smiling. Hardly an empire. Not yet, he agreed, his hands finding hers. But you have that look, the one that means you're planning something. She turned in his arms to face him. Perhaps I am. The Barton property adjoining our north pasture is for sale. Flynn's eyebrows rose. Is it now? And how did you come by this information before me? Mrs. Barton mentioned it to Catherine during a dress fitting yesterday. Cora couldn't help looking pleased with herself. 500 acres, including that stream we've been wanting access to. Water rights included. And you think we should buy it? I think we'd be fools not to. The price is fair, and with the new breeding program starting to show returns. She trailed off, studying his expression. You're not concerned, Flynn laughed, kissing her forehead. Concerned with you handling our finances? Not in the slightest. Make an offer if you think it's right. I trust your judgment completely. The easy confidence he placed in her still amazed Cora sometimes. Their partnership, both personal and professional, had flourished in ways she could never have predicted when she first arrived at Whispering Pine. A commotion from the direction of the main road drew their attention. Charlotte came galloping up on her pony Starlight, her school books bouncing precariously in her saddlebags. Cora, Flynn, she called excitedly, pulling up beside them. At 13, Charlotte had blossomed under Flynn's adoption, growing more confident by the day. Sheriff Briggs is coming, and he's got someone with him. Sure enough, 2 riders were approaching at a steady pace. Flynn stepped slightly in front of Cora, a protective gesture that had become automatic whenever unexpected visitors arrived, a lingering caution from the confrontation with Thaddeus Kendrick, who had mercifully remained absent since that night in the saloon. As the riders drew closer, Cora recognized Sheriff Briggs, but didn't know the woman accompanying him, a smartly dressed lady in her 40s, riding with the ease of someone accustomed to horses. Flynn, Mrs. Forrester, Briggs greeted them as he dismounted. Hope we're not interrupting. Not at all, Henry, Flynn replied, shaking the sheriff's hand. What brings you out our way? Briggs gestured to his companion, who was now dismounting with practiced grace. This is Mrs. Eleanor Ward from San Francisco. She's been looking for the Kendrick sisters. Cora felt Flynn tense beside her, but Mrs. Ward quickly dispelled any concerns with her warm smile. "Please don't be alarmed," she said, her cultured voice carrying a slight Eastern accent. "I bring good news, not trouble." She focused on Cora. "You must be Cora. The resemblance to your mother is remarkable." Startled, Cora stepped forward. "You knew my mother. Margaret was my dearest friend at boarding school," Mrs. Ward explained. "We corresponded regularly until about 2 years before her passing, when her letters suddenly stopped. I tried to locate her, but by then she'd moved from St. Louis with her husband and daughters." Her expression softened. "I was devastated to learn of her death only recently." Catherine had appeared from her workshop, drawn by the commotion. She approached cautiously, standing beside Charlotte as Mrs. Ward continued. "When I finally discovered what had happened, I made it my mission to find her children. It's taken nearly a year of detective work." She smiled at Sheriff Briggs. "Thankfully, your excellent lawman here was able to confirm you were all safe and well." Flynn placed a supportive hand on Cora's back. "Why don't we continue this conversation inside? Mrs. Patterson just baked fresh bread, and I'm sure she'll have coffee ready." Mrs. Ward gratefully accepted the invitation, and soon they were all settled in the ranch house parlor, where the visitor revealed the true purpose of her journey. "Margaret named me executor of a small trust in her will," Mrs. Ward explained, opening an elegant leather portfolio. "She never told your father about it, a wise precaution, it seems. It's not a fortune, but it's a substantial sum that she inherited from her grandmother and preserved for her daughters." Cora exchanged shocked glances with Catherine and Charlotte. "A trust? But how?" "Father always claimed mother brought nothing to their marriage." "Another of his lies," Mrs. Ward said, her disapproval evident. "Margaret came from a respectable Boston family, not wealthy by Eastern standards, but comfortable. She placed approximately $5,000 in this trust before her marriage, anticipating that her children might someday need independence. $5,000. The sum was staggering enough to buy a small ranch outright or establish a significant business. According to her wishes, Mrs. Ward continued, "The money is to be divided equally among her daughters upon the eldest reaching the age of 25, or upon any of them marrying before that time." She smiled at Cora. "Sheriff Briggs informs me that both conditions have now been met." Catherine found her voice first. "This means we have our own money, truly our own." "Exactly," Mrs. Ward confirmed. "I've brought the necessary papers to transfer the funds to accounts in your names at the Bank of California's Virginia City branch." Cora felt Flynn squeeze her hand, his pride and happiness for her evident in his expression. "Your mother was a remarkable woman," he said softly. "She was," Mrs. Ward agreed, "and she would be so proud to see the lives you've built here." She hesitated, then added, "There is one more thing. A letter Margaret wrote to be delivered along with the trust documents." From her portfolio, Mrs. Ward withdrew an envelope, slightly yellowed with age, and handed it to Cora. "The familiar handwriting for my daughters, when the time comes," brought immediate tears to her eyes. "Would you like some privacy?" Flynn asked gently. Cora shook her head. "No, we'll read it together, all of us." She looked at Catherine and Charlotte, who moved to sit beside her on the settee. With trembling fingers, Cora broke the seal and unfolded the letter, her mother's elegant script bringing a flood of memories. "My beloved daughters," she read aloud, her voice quavering slightly. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have reached a point in your lives where you are ready to make your own way in the world. The money this letter accompanies is my gift to you, a foundation upon which to build your dreams, whatever they may be. Cora, my steadfast firstborn, always so responsible and determined. I have no doubt you have continued to watch over your sisters with the same fierce protection you showed even as a child. Allow yourself joy, my darling. Allow yourself to be cared for, even as you care for others. Catherine, my thoughtful middle child with your artist's soul and gentle heart, never doubt your worth or your strength. Your quiet resilience has always been your greatest gift, though you may not see it yourself. And Charlotte, my precious baby, still so young as I write this, know that a mother's love transcends even death. Grow brave, grow kind, and above all, grow true to yourself. To all three of you, I offer this final advice. Family is not merely blood, but those who choose to love us completely. Find such people, hold them close, and build your lives with them. Know that wherever you are, whatever paths you travel, my love goes with you, always and forever. With eternal devotion, your loving mother. Silence filled the room as Cora finished reading, broken only by Charlotte's quiet sobs and Catherine's shaky breaths. Flynn had moved to stand behind the settee, one hand resting supportively on Cora's shoulder. She knew, Catherine whispered finally. Somehow she knew Father would fail us. And she made sure we would be able to survive it, Cora added, wiping tears from her cheeks. Mrs. Ward spoke gently from her chair. Margaret always had a sense about people. She recognized Thaddeus's weaknesses early in their marriage but remained devoted to him for your sakes. This trust was her way of ensuring you would never be completely at his mercy or anyone else's. Cora looked up at Flynn, whose eyes shone with understanding and love. Independence, she said softly. Even in death, she wanted to give us independence. A trait you clearly inherited, he replied with a smile, in the days that followed Mrs. Ward's visit. The Forrester household buzzed with plans and possibilities. Catherine decided to use her portion of the trust to expand her dressmaking business, renting proper premises in Hamilton and hiring additional seamstresses. Charlotte, too young to access her share directly, asked that a portion be set aside for her future education. She had developed an interest in veterinary medicine after helping Flynn treat an injured foal. As for Cora, her first action was to purchase the Barton property outright, securing the additional acreage and water rights for Whispering Pines expansion. The remainder she invested in the ranch's operations and set aside for their child's future. One evening in late April, as she and Flynn sat on their favorite porch chairs watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of pink and gold, Cora reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. "Penny for your thoughts," Flynn said, reaching over to take her hand. "I was just thinking about that night in the storm," Cora replied. "How desperate we were, how afraid, and then you appeared like some mythical figure out of the rain." Flynn chuckled. "Hardly mythical. Just a man who couldn't bear to see three young women in distress." "A good man," Cora corrected, squeezing his hand. "The best man I've ever known." "I'm the fortunate one," Flynn insisted. "I found not just a wife but a partner, not just a family but a purpose." He placed his free hand gently on her stomach. "And now, a future that's brighter than I ever dared hope for." As twilight deepened into night, Cora Forrester gazed out at the vast expanse of Whispering Pine Ranch, their land, their home, their legacy. From three abandoned sisters huddled beneath an oak tree to this moment of profound security and love, the transformation seemed nothing short of miraculous. Yet it wasn't miracle but resilience that had brought them here, their own determination, Flynn's compassion, and the enduring love of a mother who had ensured her daughters would always have the means to forge their own path. Independence and interconnection, strength and vulnerability, past sorrows and future joys all woven together into the rich tapestry of their shared lives. "Stay forever," Flynn had said on that stormy night, opening his home to 3 desperate strangers. Little did any of them know then how completely those words would shape their destiny, creating a legacy of love that would endure for generations to come. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Cora rested her head on her husband's shoulder, perfectly content in the knowledge that forever was just beginning. The seasons turned, and with the crisp autumn air of October 1872 came the joyous arrival of James Flynn Forrester, named for both Flynn's father and himself. The birth had been difficult but ultimately triumphant, with Cora emerging from the ordeal exhausted but radiant, a healthy son cradled in her arms. Flynn, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom door throughout the 18-hour labor, wept openly when Mrs. Patterson finally allowed him to enter. The sight of his wife and newborn son, a perfect blend of them both, with Cora's golden hair and Flynn's strong features, rendered him momentarily speechless. "Meet your son," Cora had whispered, her voice tired but filled with wonder as she placed the swaddled infant in his trembling hands. The moment Flynn held James for the first time marked a transformation in him that was visible to everyone at Whispering Pine. The already responsible rancher became somehow more grounded, more purposeful, his dedication to the land and its inhabitants deepening with the knowledge that he was building a legacy that would outlast him. By spring 1873, as James approached 6 months of age, Whispering Pine Ranch had expanded again with the acquisition of additional grazing land to the east. The Forrester breeding program had gained regional recognition, with buyers traveling from as far as California and Colorado to purchase their stock. Catherine's dressmaking business flourished in its new premises, and Charlotte, now 14, divided her time between excelling at school and absorbing every bit of veterinary knowledge she could from books Flynn ordered specially from San Francisco. Life had settled into a sweet rhythm of productive days and peaceful nights, the household functioning as a harmonious unit despite occasional disagreements and the inevitable challenges of ranch life. It was in this season of contentment that Cora received the letter that would once again test the strength of the family they had built. "It's from Father," she announced one evening as they sat at dinner, her voice tight as she scanned the single page that had arrived with that day's mail. Catherine's fork clattered against her plate, and even Charlotte, who had the fewest conscious memories of Thaddeus Kendrick, tensed visibly. Flynn, who had been feeding mashed carrots to a squirming James in his high chair, looked up sharply. "What does he want?" Cora read the letter twice before answering, her expression unreadable. "He's ill. Consumption, he says. He's in a sanatorium in Denver and wants to see us to make amends before he dies." A weighted silence fell over the table. Nearly 2 years had passed since Thaddeus had abandoned his daughters in the storm, with no word or sign of him since the confrontation in Hamilton. "You don't owe him anything," Flynn said finally, his tone carefully neutral despite the protective anger evident in his eyes. "I know," Cora replied softly. Catherine studied her older sister. "You're considering going, aren't you?" Cora folded the letter deliberately, tucking it back into its envelope. "I don't know. Part of me wants to ignore it completely, but another part," she sighed. "He is our father, despite everything. If he truly is dying, I'll go with you," Flynn stated firmly. "If you decide to see him, you won't face him alone." Mrs. Patterson, who had been quietly serving dessert, spoke up. "Forgiveness isn't just for the one who wronged you. Sometimes it's the only way to find peace for yourself." Charlotte looked between her sisters, her young face serious. "Do we all have to go? I barely remember him anymore." "No, sweetheart," Cora assured her. "This is your home and you have school. No one is forcing any of us to do anything." That night, After James was settled in his crib, Cora and Flynn discussed the situation at length in the privacy of their bedroom. Flynn listened as Cora sorted through her complicated feelings about the man who had given her life, but caused so much pain. "I keep thinking about Mother's letter," Cora admitted, sitting at her dressing table as she brushed her hair. "About family being those who choose to love us completely. Father never really chose us, not in the way that matters." Flynn came to stand behind her, their eyes meeting in the mirror. "That doesn't make your feelings any less valid. He's still your father, still part of your history." "I think I need to see him," Cora decided finally. "Not for his sake, but for mine, to close that chapter completely." She turned on her stool to face Flynn directly. "But I won't ask Catherine or Charlotte to come if they don't want to." "And I'll be right beside you," Flynn promised, pulling her gently to her feet and into his embrace. In the end, Catherine elected to accompany Cora to Denver, while Charlotte remained at Whispering Pine with Flynn and James. The sisters' journey east was comfortable but tense, both lost in their own thoughts about the man they were going to see. The Colorado State Sanatorium was a sprawling facility set in the mountains outside Denver, its clean white buildings designed to provide tubercular patients with the fresh air considered essential to treatment. A sympathetic nurse led Cora and Catherine to a small private room where Thaddeus Kendrick lay propped up in bed, a mere shadow of the imposing figure he had once been. "My girls," he whispered as they entered, his voice a harsh rasp. "You came." Cora moved to the bedside chair while Catherine remained standing just inside the doorway, her posture rigid. "Hello, Father," Cora said quietly. Up close, she could see how ravaged he was by the disease: sunken cheeks, yellowish skin, the same telltale signs they had watched consume their mother years before. "Where's the little one?" Thaddeus asked, his breathing labored. "Charlotte, safe at home," Catherine answered, her tone cool. "With people who truly care for her." A flicker of shame crossed Thaddeus's gaunt features. "I deserve that, deserve worse." He focused on Cora. "Heard you married the rancher, have a child now too?" "Yes, a son, James." Despite herself, Cora couldn't prevent the softening in her voice when speaking of her family. "Good, that's good." Thaddeus closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. "I didn't ask you here to beg forgiveness. No, I don't deserve it, just wanted to see you one last time. Do one right thing before I go." He gestured weakly toward a small valise beside the bed. "In there, papers, signed over what little I have left to you girls. Not much, few acres in Colorado, some mining shares, probably worthless but legally yours now." Cora felt a complicated surge of emotions, not gratitude exactly, but recognition of the gesture for what it was. A final, feeble attempt at paternal responsibility. "Thank you," she said simply. Thaddeus seemed to rally slightly, his next words coming with surprising clarity. "Your mother would be proud of who you've become, not because of me, despite me." His gaze shifted to Catherine. "Both of you got her strength, her goodness." Catherine's stance softened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, we did." They stayed for just over an hour, the conversation halting and often awkward, but free from the bitterness and accusations that had characterized their last encounter. As they prepared to leave, Thaddeus reached for Cora's hand. "One more thing," he said, his voice fading. "Been sober since Hamilton. Too late, I know, but wanted you to know." Cora nodded, finding that the anger she had carried for so long had transmuted into something closer to pity. "Goodbye, Father." Stepping into the corridor, she found Catherine already wiping away silent tears. They walked arm in arm to their waiting carriage, neither speaking until they were well away from the sanatorium. "I thought I'd feel different," Catherine said finally. "Vindicated or triumphant or something. Instead, I just feel sad. For the father we might have had, Cora suggested. For the family that could have been. Yes. Catherine gazed out the carriage window at the passing landscape. But then I think about the family we do have: you and Flynn, Charlotte, little James, even Mrs. Patterson. And I can't feel too regretful about the path that led us here, difficult as it was. Cora squeezed her sister's hand. Mother was right. Family is those who choose to love us completely. Flynn chose us, Catherine said with a small smile. All of us from that very first night. And we chose him back, Cora added. That's what matters in the end. Thaddeus Kendrick died 3 days later, before Cora and Catherine had even returned to Nevada. The news reached them via telegram at a stop in Salt Lake City, forwarded by the sanatorium director. They marked his passing with a quiet prayer and continued their journey home, both feeling a complex mixture of grief and release. The return to Whispering Pine brought healing in its familiar routines and loving embraces. Flynn, who had managed both ranch and household capably in Cora's absence, welcomed them with understanding and support, asking few questions but offering consistent comfort as they processed their complicated emotions. Charlotte, who had chosen to remember primarily the rare good moments with their father, suggested planting a tree in his memory, not because he was the best father but because without him, none of us would be here. And so, on a clear May morning, the extended family of Whispering Pine gathered in a small clearing near the main house to plant a young oak sapling. As Flynn and Charlotte tamped down soil around its base, Cora stood with James on her hip, Catherine beside her, and Mrs. Patterson nearby, reflecting on the strange circularity of life, how an abandonment beneath an oak tree had ultimately led to this moment of peace and belonging. I think he would have liked this, Charlotte said as they finished, stepping back to admire their work. A living thing that will grow stronger every year. Like us, Catherine added softly. Flynn came to stand beside his wife, one arm encircling her waist while his free hand gently tousled James's golden curls. Like all of us together, he agreed. As summer bloomed across Whispering Pine, the ranch's fortunes continued to prosper. The expanded breeding program yielded exceptional foals. Catherine's business opened a second location in nearby Virginia City, and Charlotte received word that she had been accepted to a special science program at the territorial school, a rare opportunity for a young woman with her ambitions. For Cora, watching her family thrive brought a deep satisfaction that transcended even her pride in the ranch's success. The knowledge that her sisters had found their paths, that her son was growing strong in a home filled with love, that her marriage to Flynn deepened with each passing day, these were the true measures of wealth in her estimation. One evening in late July, as a spectacular sunset painted the western sky in hues of flame and gold, Flynn found Cora standing on their favorite ridge overlooking the vastness of Whispering Pine Ranch. James, now nearly 10 months old and determined to explore every inch of his world, dozed in the sling she had fashioned to carry him while still keeping her hands free for work. "Admiring our kingdom?" Flynn asked, coming to stand beside her. It had become a running joke between them, his reference to her ambitious vision for the ranch as an empire that first spring of their marriage. Cora smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Actually, I was thinking about storms. Storms. Hum. How sometimes the worst moments of our lives, the ones that seem like they'll break us, are actually directing us exactly where we need to go." She looked up at him. "If Father hadn't abandoned us that night, we might never have found Whispering Pine. Never found you." Flynn's arms tightened around her. "I like to think we would have found each other somehow. Some paths are meant to cross, storm or no storm." "Perhaps," Cora conceded, "but I'm grateful for this particular path, difficult as parts of it were. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sunlight fade into dusk, the first stars beginning to appear in the deepening blue above. James stirred against Cora's chest, making the small, contented sounds that never failed to melt her heart. "I have news," she said finally, her voice soft with significance. Flynn turned her gently to face him. "What kind of news?" "The kind that means James will have a brother or sister by next spring." The joy that illuminated Flynn's face was answer enough, but he gathered her carefully into his arms, mindful of their sleeping son between them, and kissed her with such tenderness that Cora felt tears spring to her eyes. "Another child," he whispered against her hair. "Another piece of our forever." As twilight settled over Whispering Pine Ranch, Cora Forrester looked out at the land that had become so much more than a refuge. It was their legacy, their future, the physical manifestation of the love and commitment that had grown from that first desperate night. Three sisters abandoned in a storm, a cowboy who had taken them to his ranch and said, "Stay forever." Forever, it turned out, was not just a length of time but a quality of love enduring, evolving, embracing joy and sorrow alike. And as stars emerged like diamonds scattered across the velvet sky, Cora knew with absolute certainty that their forever was only just beginning.